Hi, this is lesson 6, part 2, where we're going to construct a histogram. So we're going to make a histogram using the dot plot in the prior video. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to construct a dot plot, or I'm sorry, construct a histogram this time. So we're going to construct a histogram, and we'll see what this means with 5 classes. Okay, so here's where it begins. What we need to do, this 5 here tells me that I need to evenly divide, this distance. So we want to evenly divide this distance. Into 5 parts. 5 parts. Not only that, but this distance, the distance from the lowest to the highest, is called the range. And so the range, this distance, we say is equal to the highest value minus the lowest. Okay, so let's come back up here. I'm going to use that information. We want 5 classes. So here's what we do. So we take our range. Let's find that first. So our range is 9 minus 1, which is 8. Now we want this into 5 equal parts. So what we do is then we take our 8, we divide it by 5, and if we do that, we get 1.625. Now, right off the bat, this is a problem. And the problem is that if we use 1.625, then it's hard to figure out where to start and where to put each marker to divide these into groups. So here's what we do for a workaround. We always, I'm going to put comma, always round up to the next value as the data. Okay, so in our example, our data is in whole numbers, like zeros and ones, twos, threes, all the way up to 9, and whole numbers continue 10, 11, 12. So data is in whole numbers. Okay, so if we're at 1.625, this is a decimal. The next whole number above that is 2. So we're going to use 2 as our dividers, and we're going to call this 2, we're going to call it the class width. This is called our class width. Now, so then, here's what we want to do. For the sake of just kind of humorous illustration, imagine that we don't want to hurt our dots. We want to keep our dots whole. So let's just make that no splitting dots. No splitting of dots. Now, I'm going to do this in red, and because this is not what you want to do, but so that we can see why. For example, let's say if I started this at 1. Well, if I started my first divider at 1, that would split those 2 dots. And then my next divider would go to 3, and that would split those 2 dots. But we don't want to do that, yet we want to have something to 2. Well, maybe we could shift to the left. What if we shifted to the left here? So I'm going to just put a little dot to connect those, because that was one idea. What if we went to 0 and then to 2? Well, we don't have any split dots at the 0, but notice that when we land on 2, we split that dot. So that doesn't really work very well either. So let's do this correctly, and here's what we do. And we'll make our bins, we'll make these in blue, and we'll call them bins. So since our data is in whole numbers, like 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on, what we do is we just go right in between a whole number. So for example, and not only that, we always begin just below the lowest data. So if our lowest data is at 1, the next value below that is 0. So if we split 0 and 1, we would begin exactly at a half. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a bin that goes from 0.5. Now if we go 2 units above that, here's 1, and then there's 2 units. Notice no dots have been hurt in the production of this video. And then if we start at the 2.5 and we continue again over, we're going to land at, here's another one, there's 2 more units, and that's going to put us at 4.5. Again, no dots were split. And if we continue this pattern, and we'll put boxes around everything that falls into those dividers, if you will. And notice that this one here doesn't have any, but we can't break stride. We want to stay constant or consistent. And it's okay to have 0 dots in a group. And then we go from 8.5, we're going to go just above that to 10.5. I should probably make a little extension here of my number line. Let's do that. And so there. Now I have divided my data into here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal groups. And we call these bins. So we have 5 equal bins. Now, this is not quite the histogram, but we have everything we now need to make the histogram. And here's how we do that. So let's come down, and I'm going to leave that picture just at the top of my screen. And now we can make our histogram. So it starts out just as you would expect. So I'll draw our horizontal line, and we'll start here at 0. Let's start at 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we go all the way to 11. So let's number that. Now, before you do anything more, we need to add another number line. And this time we're going to go in the vertical direction. In a way, you might have already seen this coming, and these should be perpendicular. Mine's a little off there. That might be better. Okay, so here's what we do. And on this data, the number of bins, or I'm sorry, the number of dots. So the number of dots in a bin is called the frequency. And when we make our histogram, the height of the bin represents the frequency. So, and we put that over here on this vertical, we call this a vertical axis. This is a vertical axis. Okay, and now notice the highest frequency we have comes from this bin number 3. We have 4 values. So we probably want to take our graph to at least 4, maybe 5. Let's try 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we'll label this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And let's label this on this vertical axis. This is our frequency. And on this horizontal axis, this is our data set information. Okay, now, here's how we do this. And I'll do this in blue so you can see how it coincides with the work above. In our bin number 1 above, notice that it starts at 0.5 and it ends at 2.5, and it has 3 dots. So what we're going to do is And I'm going to just make a little horizontal line off of 3, so these all line up, and we'll do one off of 4. And what we're going to do then is we start at 0.5, right here. We're going to go all the way up to 3. And then we're going to go over to 2.5, and again, go all the way up to 3. And then we're going to connect those. And that is the first bin of our histogram. And then we continue. The next bin up above has 3, so it's also going to go from 2.5. It's going to go from 2.5 up to the 3. Then we go over to our next marker, which was 4.5. And then we connect it. And that's our next bin of the histogram. Okay, our bin number 3 above looks like it has 4 dots. So it's going to go from 4.5 up to 4. And then we go up 6.5. Again, we go up to the 4 line. Connect that. And that's the next bin on our histogram. Now our next bin from 6.5 to 8.5, there's none. And sometimes what people will do just for clarity is they'll just put just a little line across that segment, just to represent that they recognize that there's nothing in there. And then our last one, there's 1 dot in the bin from 8.5 to 10.5. So just for clarity, I'm going to take my 1 line and carry it over so I can keep track there. And let's get our blue. So I'm going to go from 8.5 up to the 1, and then 10.5 up to the 1, and I'm going to connect these. And that is a histogram. Doesn't that look nice? And then oftentimes you'll see you could color each bin if you wanted to make them look nice. And sometimes the bins are called bars. You could color one of them blue. You could color another one. Maybe you want to do one in orange. Looks kind of flashy. Maybe you want to color another one in purple. Oops, purple. This is more of a magenta. Okay, and that is how we make our histogram. So there's a few things to notice. These numbers, and let's go back to our regular writing pen. The edges here, the edges of the bin, edges of bins are called class boundaries. They're called class boundaries. So our first class, it starts at 0.5 and it goes up to what? It looks like it goes to 2.5. So that would be our first class with boundaries of 0.5 to 2.5. And notice this, it also has a frequency, of 3. Our next class, if you look closely, it looks like it goes from 2.5 to 4.5. Those are its boundaries. And it has a frequency. I'm going to do this. If you've ever seen that, it just means that those are exactly the same words above. It also has a frequency of 3. Our next class goes from 4.5 to 6.5. And it has a frequency of 4. With 2 more classes here. Notice that you can't, even though it's a 0, you still need to count it. So from 6.5 to 8.5, those are the class boundaries of our next class. And it has a frequency of 0. And finally, our last class that we formed begins at 8.5, goes to 10.5. Those are its class boundaries. And it has a frequency of 1. And that is how you take the idea of a histogram, divide the number line into equal segments, which we call classes, and the edges of those classes are called the class boundaries, and the number of dots in those divisions forms our frequency. And that's how we make histograms. Hope that helps, and thanks for watching.